I've actually got a really booming voice. Years ago, I worked in banking, and we used to have graduates through, right? And when they had their graduation, they would say something. They'd get up and talk when they became, grown up bank managers. And one of them got up, one of mine, and I'd listened to everyone else's speeches, and mine went last. And everyone was like, John had done all these amazing things for them, and Daniel just got up and said, Julia has the only voice that can be heard from the moon. And I was like, oh yeah, you little shit, I'll get to you later. But look, I feel very grateful to be here, and I feel grateful to those who actually turned up to watch me. I want to start with a disclaimer. This is my disclaimer. This is, I'm not a farmer. I know I don't farm. These are my animals. The cattle are pets. I eat other people's. I just can't eat my own. Otis, the big guy there, that's Otis, Colin the baby, and Brian. He actually is like my baby. Like, Otis is huge. The other day I opened a gate to try and move him through a paddock, and I think that his fat has got around his brain or something because he's quite slow, and so he got confused about the gate, and although the other two he went the opposite direction, so I had to sort of lead him with my sweatshirt down the paddocks and into another place. So that's kind of how bad I am. That miniature pony hates me with a passion. He actually broke into the house the other day when I was actually on a call trying to get some work, and then I tried to act normal, and then I made it awkward because I was trying to act awkward, and there was a little horse like trying to bite my face in the background, and I was just like and I imagine if you had a really bad kid, that's how you'd act. So that's my disclaimer, right? Like, I live in Eureka in New Zealand. The other disclaimer is I'm sorry about my accent. I love the Australian accent. I think it's warm, I think it's fun, I think it's lifting. And then we had the American accents, and they were warm, and they were fun, and they were lifting. And then the New Zealand accent. You just sound like your parents are really closely related. And it's like, when I kind of think about it, and I was like, oh, I ordered something at a restaurant the other night, and the completely opposite thing that I ordered came. And I was like, shit. I'm used to that because I've travelled in China, and all I do there is I just swallow everything whole because I can't always identify what the food is, so I just cut it into bits and get it down so you don't have to worry about it. But it's, so it was quite funny, so I'm sorry about my accent. I also speak really super fast, so huge apologies for that. I'll give you a quick whistle-stop through my career. Look, I've had a series of fortunate events. I was a currency trader to start out with, hence why I'm probably a little bit hyper and a little bit crazy. Best time in my life, best time. Thought my heart would stop when I left. I think my heart would have stopped if I stayed. I entered currency trading during the Asian crisis, and then I was there during September 11. I went into rural banking, so I led a rural banking team just at the start of the GFC. And that was interesting when you haven't actually lent money or borrowed money, leading a team who lend out lots of money to farmers through the GFC. It was a real baptism by fire. I actually only got that job because I was a woman. They were desperate at the time to build diversity, desperate. And they'd asked every single woman they had in agri-banking to apply for the job, and they wouldn't. I applied for 7 jobs, and I got turned down for 6. I'm a very persistent person. I have great ambition, not necessarily the smarts to go with it, but I give it a good nudge. I went into KPMG, and I was really lucky to work with a futurist for many years doing consulting and learning and research around the world. I did many years looking at plant protein. That was pretty interesting, like not my jam, right, or alternative proteins, but really interesting to learn about it. And then I moved into capital markets for a while, and now I'm out on my own. So JJ Consulting, yep, I put a lot of thought into that, it happened quickly. I just want to take you back, and no, this is not a whole presentation of my family photos, because everyone's like, shit, how am I going to get out without her seeing me? And I will call you out if you leave while I'm talking. This is my sister and I on the school bus. So I grew up in a town called Ross on the west coast of the South Island. Really tiny town, only 200 people in it. I was super lucky to have that opportunity. When you're 5 and you don't actually have to be home until dinner time, or you go do whatever the hell you want, you learn to explore. You learn to do really cool things. I mean, we didn't have animals that killed us. You guys got a lot of shit that kills you. But it's, we had mine shafts. It was a mining town. We knew that we had cyanide because they used to kill the possums. Sorry, I know. I always feel bad when I say that because you don't kill possums here. You're not meant to, but we kill ours. And there would be trees painted with spray paint showing where the cyanide was and all these things. And so you learnt to explore and you learnt to adventure and you make decisions and you learn and grow. Sadly, though, my parents, and I'm not putting them down, great people, but they lost every property to mortgagee sale. Every single property. So they were great people, gave us unconditional love, They always told us we could be anything we wanted to be, but they were real victims. It was always someone else's fault. It was the government, it was the rich guy down the road, it was the weather, it was interest rates, it was the bank, it was whoever else it could be, and it was never them. And it was an incredibly dysfunctional environment. And this isn't a new story, right? Like, I'm sure there's many people in here who have the same similar story, same or similar story. The key here, though, is that victim mentality really freaked me out. And I probably didn't notice it until I was a bit of an adult. But if you spend your time blaming someone else for things not working for you, you actually never go and seek a solution yourself. I then went into rural banking, and as the regional manager, you tend to only go out to things that aren't working or farms that are having issues. It was actually quite freaky. You go out, and I'm sitting across the table from these farmers telling me the same things that my parents had told me. It's the bank's fault, it's the interest rate's fault, it's the weather's fault, it's the commodity price's fault, it's the neighbour's fault, it's the government's fault, it's the council's fault. It was always someone else's fault. And I just started thinking, how do we help people understand how we can take back some power, how we can take some responsibility for our own actions, but also survive and navigate things that we can't control. So hopefully I kind of give you a bit of a taste of that. If nothing else, that's fine. Guy over there is getting a couple of emails done. There'll be a few other people catching up on work. Hopefully no one's in the middle of a video call. That's the only thing I ask that you don't do, unless you can sign language through it. Right, so I want to take you on a bit of a stop around what's happening in the world. The first thing we need to think about is protectionism. Every country is trying to be self-sufficient, the best that they can. Now, even China, and I was in Singapore last year, and there was a Chinese speaker saying how they wanted to be self-sufficient in dairy. Now, that's great, but you can't actually grow food for cows there. So, I don't need to tell this audience, you need to get something in before you get something out. And so there was a bit of a problem for them, but they're going to keep trying, and they'll work really hard at it. And this is what we're going to find around the world at the moment, where countries are trying to protect their own environment. And it creates a lot of irrational policy. So I'll give you an example. Europe have just brought in a policy around not buying products where deforestation has been used to produce the product. Now, this is an attempt to have a go at Brazil. So the sad thing is the impact of that will be on the small farmer in Brazil, not the corporate farmer. So it's kind of, these irrational things start to come up where these countries are desperately trying to protect themselves. And the reason I say I want to warn people about how irrational it is when we try to rationalise it, or we try to say that we can fight it, we've got to be really conscious of what our position is, and often we can't. My research looking at, I think Australia, you're just over 3% of the global food system. New Zealand's about just under 2%. We've got to be really careful that we don't sit there and think that we can actually go into countries and bang our fists on the table and say, you have to do this. Because global policy will continue to be a bit quirky. But we just need to be careful that what we're doing at home doesn't lock us out or have a greater impact than that global policy as well. I think we've had real social volatility. Everyone's fucking angry. And then everyone's angry because everyone else is angry. And then they're angry at those guys for being angry. It's like, I think I have undiagnosed Tourette's too, so apologies for swearing. Everyone is really, really wound up at the moment. And we're all angry, and we think everyone hates each other, and journalists think everyone hates them, and maybe they do, and farmers think everyone hates them, and they don't. They just got a lot of shit on their plate right now. Nobody hates farmers. We all know where the food comes from. There's just a lack of connection now that we don't go to Uncle's farm on the holidays. But that social volatility, things that we believed were right, systems that used to work don't work like they used to work anymore. So we've got all this sort of social volatility happening. Then we've got climate resilience. And, sitting here today, it's around the world, this water issue. New Zealand, we can't get water storage through. And I don't understand why. Because water, we talk about climate resilience, and water is going to be one of the most important things to sustain our communities. Yet we do dumb things and regulation around it. And that would be probably one of the few things I would say around some of the messaging is we really need to be careful and make sure that we push on that water thing. But this climate resilience is really important. How we farm is going to be so different. How we're going to grow, or what we grow, will have to change, and we'll have to evolve. And look, even for me in New Zealand, I've only got 10 acres. Isn't it crazy, the scale? I literally, at Xander McDonald Awards earlier in the year, I sat next to a guy who was talking in the millions of something around the land, that the company he worked for, and I think I blacked out, because I was like, I literally can't get my head around that when I have 10 acres. But anyway, I said, look, yeah, I totally relate to what you're talking about. Mine's the same. And but I think, we've had rain for 9 months. I woke up one morning and there was water, and I'm not anywhere near a river. There was water lapping at my doors, and my whole property was a lake. It was crazy. I mean, it photographed beautifully, I've got to be honest. But it just was scary as shit, right? So all of a sudden, I'm preparing for a drought, and we've had 9 months worth of rain, and we got so much rain in a night that it flooded my entire property. It drained within 24 hours. I was very lucky. But here's that thing with change and climate resilience. We've got to make sure we're getting on top of these things, and we've got to make sure our communities are resilient. The next thing is this financial stuff. Like the interest rates going up, I talk about this, and I have done for years, and I missed the boat when my interest rates and my mortgage went up. And I was like, you dumbass. You basically talk about this, and you didn't even follow your own advice. I don't think we've got this huge financial volatility, and I was listening before when Tony was speaking, and interest rates, when he gave that example of the guy with the 10 cattle beasts and then had to sell 50, he probably had to sell 50 5 years ago, or 10 years ago maybe. So I think we've just forgotten how to manage these things. I think we've got to have some sense of belief in ourselves and our abilities that we will navigate this. And in my experience, a really shitty financial time makes you better at what you do. It makes you better at business. It hurts, it sucks, and you have to give stuff up that you don't want to give up. But the reality of it is it makes us better at business, and it does make us more resilient. The only way you build resilience is actually by getting punched in the face a couple of times. And it sucks, and you bruise, and it hurts, but you get better at it. The last thing on this I want to talk about is scrutiny. Don't lose sight, back to protectionism, and then scrutiny. So the more countries want to protect themselves, the more scrutiny there's going to be. There's more areas that they want to catch you out. There's more areas that with export, they're going to put expectations over you. And it's not good enough to say you're good at something. You have to be really good at it, and you have to validate that you're good at it. It's not good enough now to just tell them you're good. You have to show them that you are good, and you have to show them through data. And it's tough, right? Because the data sometimes is difficult. We heard before about big lakes of it, all these things. But we've got to make sure that the data provides insight that gives security, and it gives certainty to those who are buying our food. And there's lots of examples at the moment. A New Zealand company called Halter, and that's where you can move animals from a collar, and it also creates a whole lot of data that you can use around animal welfare, so the vital signs of the animals. There'll be lots of those sorts of things coming through. If we think for a second that we're just going to be able to get a vet sign off that the welfare of our animals is good, then we're kidding ourselves. We're going to end up having to have data to validate all this. Scrutiny will be strong. This is a very New Zealand example, but we had a shipment of produce that got stopped, a ship that got stopped going into Europe because we didn't have the paperwork to prove that we'd paid the fair living wage to the packers. Or pickers, sorry, not the packers. Or maybe the packers, I don't know. The packers, same. But ultimately, they stopped the shipment. Now, I don't know what happened. The shipment got through. Maybe somebody was out the back quickly filling out some paperwork. But this is what's going to happen, because as governments try to protect, or they have this protectionism, and here's the irrational thing, we are producing food that sustains their people. It doesn't make sense, right? But they will continue to do it. So we have to be smart how we approach things. And I guess if I could give you any advice around this, not that you've asked for it, so please feel free to ignore it or do more emails, is just be really careful with your messaging around your country messaging here, where you're trying, keep farmers farming, that message. Be very conscious that that doesn't become an international message, because that's just going to be weaponry and a reason for others to not do trade. So it's important messaging, just don't mix it up with the beautiful attributes of your products, with the awesome things that you do. And look, I'll stand here and be straight up, not because I've been brought in, but I seriously have always admired Australian farming and marketing. The amount of times I've had Australian marketing and all through my presentations to show what good looks like. And so don't underestimate your power, although you've got a lot of stuff happening regulatory with your actual government. Make sure that you don't blur those lines with export, because you need to make sure that you're able to tell a really good story outwardly and also to your public around Australia, at the same time as garnering some sort of empathy from everyone. And look, there's all of these things happening are starting to kind of create issues, right? So we've got that food security conversation happens all the time. Now, I chair a charity that gets food from farms into food banks. I wasn't the founder. Two amazing farmers put it all together themselves, and I was lucky to come on board once it was up and running. Amazing what we do, but we just can never get enough food because the need keeps growing. So we do meat and we do milk. I don't know if you've ever got a food parcel. I grew up on food parcels with food banks. You know, they're quite cool when you're a kid because it's chips and biscuits. But the thing is, we've got people who are undernourished because they're actually not able to get access to the right food. The cost of living crisis is global. It's not Australian and it's not New Zealand. It is global. It's everywhere. I've got to be honest, I was about crap my pants with excitement when I bought food the other day because it felt real cheap to me. So, you know, it's perspective and it's difference. But that cost of living crisis is a global thing right now. We've got wars, we know. You see it on the news all the time. It's difficult. There's going to be more of this. Things will get worse before they get better. The speed of change is massive. The speed of change that we have coming. We've got to be really careful that we don't try and think we can slow it down. I was listening actually to a leader in New Zealand, and his words were, what we need to do is just slow change. And I thought, fuck, let me get a pencil. That's great. This is awesome. I need to write this down because this is good work. But, you know, the reality of it is you can't slow change. But maybe you can slow some of the decisions that you make around it. And this is where I think when we talk about policy, it's actually maybe about slowing down some of the policy and thinking through it rather than just having it whipped through really fast so you look cool. And not you, as the politicians. The other thing too, I think, is that demographic shifting. We do have a lot of younger people coming into our demographics, and they think and feel differently. Now, I don't want to speak for them because there'll be plenty in this room. Well, I hope you probably left. I was probably too old to listen to. But there'll be people in this room that are of that younger demographic. They expect different things. You know, before I read it, and I'm not criticising it, but, you know, we need to navigate the hiring rules better. Could we flip that over? Do we actually need to make our environments that people farm in better so it's more attractive? Do we need to think of it like that? Because young people do work differently. They watched all of us just about kill ourselves working 24/7. They're not dumb enough to do that. They've learnt their lessons. They want to have balance. How can we create that so we can get that one extra person into the environment? Also, that demographic around the world growth. World populations aren't growing. They've actually basically peaked, mostly. They're not declining because old people are living longer. Praise the Lord. But what we're finding is that just be conscious that our actual population, so the birth rates are actually slowing, and so we don't actually have a whole lot of growth happening around the world at the moment. So populations have peaked, in particular in the developed world. I think Nigeria and Venezuela are two that are growing, probably not nations that I'd want to be doing too much trade with. The last thing there is, I think we've all got quite a lot of fatigue around big picture. And I'm one of those assholes that goes around giving big picture. Oh, you know, you just got to look to the future and be really positive, and I get heaps of crap about it constantly. But the reality of it is we're a bit tired. We feel like we're in a crisis and we're in a burning building. And if you're standing in a burning building and you're exhausted, you don't want someone to say, hey, really think through where the exit might be. And really imagine it. You know, go into your heart and just look through. You actually just want someone to tell you, run down the stairs. Oh, sorry, my amazing hair is just not my thing. Oh, hang on, I'll get myself all... I'm so awkward sometimes. Oh my God, this is me every day, by the way. And then, you know, so in the big picture, fatigue is exhausting. But then on the other side of it, we're like, I don't want to be told what to do. I got into farming so I could do whatever I wanted, so I didn't have anyone to answer to. There is no such thing as no one to answer to, not when you're using natural capital. So I think we've kind of got to find that balance between that big picture, look forward, big futuristic view, with the how do we actually get there in a practical way that maintains and supports our communities. And I think we've got to be kind of careful around our messaging. It's not the message, it's how we deliver it. And I'll be really honest with you today, in a lot of the messaging, if I was wondering if I should be in agriculture, I probably would be thinking no. So I think we've got to be conscious of let's be honest and straightforward with what's real, but also let's do it in a way. So positivity is not saying everything is great. This is not about being toxic. It's not about going, yeah, man, everything's so awesome, I love it. I'll be honest, I had the shittest year I've had in many, many years this year. The worst year ever. I feel the best I've felt in a couple of years right now, but it's been a really tough year. But I had to get out of bed, and I had a mortgage to pay, and I had to keep doing stuff. And so I had to navigate that in the best, most positive way that I could. So I didn't pretend it was good. I knew it was shit, but I had to navigate that. And I think it's about helping people navigate what's happening in a positive way. Now, I get heaps of crap in New Zealand. They're like, don't tell us just to be positive. You know what? We're all worried about mental health. Do you seriously think we make people's mental health better by telling them how shit everything is? Do you seriously think if there's someone in an isolated area in Australia listening to something on the radio where someone says, everything is shit, the regulations are going to kill the community, we're never going to be able to farm again, that it's actually going to help them with their mental health? I don't think so. I'm not a psychologist, but I'm going to tell you right now that, parts of our brain, there's been neurological science done on it. And when we tell people to feel bad, they will feel bad. They'll start to say, why me? Why is this happening to us? You know what happens in your brain? The part of the brain that already has stories made up, it goes to that. And it starts telling you, because everyone hates farmers, because it's shit, the government hate us, they're against us. Nobody loves us. Oh, we're unappreciated. No food, no farm, no food. These are the stories that we start to tell ourselves. If we ask our brain to how are we going to navigate this, it actually goes to a solution part of your brain. It goes in there and it goes, how do we navigate this? How do we get through it? So we've got to be really careful with our messaging. It is not about being toxic and saying things are good when they're not. It's about owning the shit that is bad and helping people understand that there will always be a way through it. I think too, we've got to realise we've got this whole new supply chain stakeholder base. Well, they're not actually a new stakeholder base, truth be told. I think what we've got is we've had these silent ones. So the old consumer, right? We have always had the consumer, and we're probably sick of hearing it. You guys are way more connected than we are in New Zealand. But, the consumer, they want, pink ribbons, they want this, they want, fluffy cats, they want, all the cows to be called Sue, they want all the, all of these things. But then now we've got border control, and that's not biosecurity, that is border access. So that is trade agreements, that is protectionism, that stakeholder sits in. Then you've got whoever you sell into. You've got their local regulation you've got to think about. So you're selling into the US, and you've got to think about the US and whatever their regulation is. I heard a lot of talk about the Middle East. Even they probably have some level of regulation. So you've got to start to think about that. Then we've got the investor. This is where it starts to get a bit tricky. So if you're selling into a Nestle, a Danone, or a Tesco's or Sainsbury's or any other label around, they're going to have investors. And what we're seeing globally at the moment is the investor is having more impact on how we need to produce food than the consumer is. Because what they're saying is, this is risk management. I want to be really clear, the thing ESG that everyone over talks about, and it's boring as shit, right? The actual context is not socialist context. It is as pure as this, the wealth being protected as much as it can be. It is about protecting wealth. It is not about making the planet better. But ironically, by making the planet better, we're going to protect our wealth. So it's all these stakeholders coming in. And then the last one's the bank. And I don't know if there's any bankers in the room. I want to say to the banks that we need to start being really honest with our supply chain. We need to start being honest with our farmers, and we need to start being really honest with our processors, and we have to start being really honest, and we need to have some skin in the game from the banks, because shit is going to hit the fan with their investors, because they are going to get pressure, and they are going to get pressured to force things on farmers and other businesses. And at the moment, they're saying, no, it's just about profitability. Everything's going to be fine, don't worry. Now, in my experience as a banker, and I don't mean this detrimentally to banks because we desperately need them, is what they tend to do is say what makes you happy on the day, and then you're going to get hit the back of the head with something in a couple of weeks. And I don't mean that literally. Don't freak out when your bank manager turns up and you're like, oh, I don't want to turn my back on you. But the reality of it is that the stakeholder group are going to have a lot of power, and we have to be wary of it. Now, this doesn't stop us from farming. This doesn't stop us from being awesome. This doesn't stop us from being able to do what we can do. What it does do, though, is we need to be careful. So we come back to scrutiny. We need to make sure our data is done. We need to make sure that we're recording things effectively. We need to make sure that we understand what we need to do to get our products into market and how that stakeholder base looks. And I just think, no victim, right? We've got to be careful that we're not always victims. And look, I love this whole campaign, and oh God, people are pretty like, Jesus, why did we get her? And she's just been a bitch about us. But that campaign is great, right? But we tried it in New Zealand and it died of natural causes. I think your messaging is crisper and clearer, and it's great. But what it said was, it kind of made, the one we did, wasn't yours one won't do this, but our one kind of made farmers sound like victims. And so the public went, oh Jesus, here we go again. And so I think we've got to be really careful that we don't act like victims. And then we don't need a hero, because there are so many different things that need to be solved. I mean, that amazing list that Tony and David showed was incredible. Massive list of things to work through, right? We don't need one person coming and trying to save it. We don't need one person coming in and hoping that they're going to be the one that gets their, I don't know, Australian of the Year because they saved something. We just don't need ego, and we don't need heroes. We actually just need to get down and get shit done, because it's going to be tough. And look, I put this in words purely because I thought if I said dick in my language, that it'd sound like don't be a dick. And you're like, cool, I'm not going to lie on the floor and get people to walk on me. But it's, I think just be really careful. And look, I'm not being an arsehole saying this, because I can be a real dick sometimes, and there's probably a number of people in the room going, you are being a dick now. I think we all flick into it sometimes, right? Like, it's just sometimes we get our passion and our drive, and we just get wound up, and we just kind of fire in there, and next minute it becomes personal. I thought the beautiful thing about this morning was your minister and DJ. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to call him that because I don't really know him. People call me JJ, so it's fine. But it's, I thought that was beautiful. There was nothing personal in either of their conversations. I thought that was brilliant. Even to the point where DJ took the time to say he's actually a good person. This is not about the person, this is about the policy. And I think keep that messaging going, because that will keep people up. In New Zealand, we kind of have like silly stuff happening at the moment where people make a meme up about someone and it's become personal. And the thing is if there's really dumb policy, make the policy look stupid, not yourself. So be really conscious around that not being a dick. And if you are a bit of a dick, that's okay. Just try and work out why you're a dick that time and not be one next time. And I think, look, future success. Again, I'm not shitting you. Your branding, I went up to Singapore last year and I was checking out New Zealand dairy products in this really high-end supermarket. I can't remember the brand of it. Amazing Australian brand up there. Had carbon zero meat. It had non-carbon zero meat, not sure how that all worked. It had basically, there was this huge display. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And then the New Zealand stuff was like in the back in the bargain bit, right, it's tucked away. It had to go under a couple of, old bits of squid and stuff to find it. And so I think you underestimate how much power you have and how much of a story you have across your sector with export. I think that you have, just don't leave any value on the table. That would be my one bit of advice. Is don't leave value on the table. Don't get so hung up that you're so angry and so upset about what's happening with regulation, is that you forget the good things that you're doing, that you forget the great things that you're doing around all of your products. Because, man, you have no idea how awesome you are. You really don't. Every fucking day is biblical for you. You have a flood, you have a fire, and you have a plague in a year. And I'm not even taking the piss. Like, that's real shit. I get upset because the water lapped up against my door. It, went away within a minute. It was fine. Otis had found a wee lake, a wee little island, and the horses were in the yards. But it's, what you actually go through is massive. So don't underestimate how much the general public, even outside Australia, get on board with that and feel for you with that. So just don't play chicken with your own success. I think sometimes we can sit there and we just navel gaze, or we get stuck in things, or we're kind of really upset about stuff and it frustrates us. Don't let that destroy your future. And look, I think seek to understand. I think at times we have, and in particular I see this in New Zealand, and I see it sometimes on social media with Australian farmers, is we want to be understood so desperately, but we don't take the time to think of anyone else. And if I see the thing, no farm, no food, one more time, I literally am going to headbutt someone. Because when I think about it, there's no tractor driver, no food. There's no truck driver, no food. There's no process guy. There's no cleaner of the processes. There's no salesperson in market. There's no people that are willing to take on directorship roles of big organisations like this at the detriment of their own business and their own families probably. We've got to think about it outside just that farming space. We have to demonstrate that we empathise with others, because we do not own the exclusive rights to hardship. There are a lot of people doing it really hard, and I know you guys do it a lot harder than many, but you've got to be really careful that we don't end up in this thing where we're telling everyone that our life is harder than yours, when in reality there are people doing it tough. I think the other thing too is people get new information and change their minds sometimes, and I think we've got to be careful that we don't attack for that. And I think I see this with the government. I've certainly seen it with ours. They had some massive own goals in agriculture, but we locked them in. We locked them into keeping them because we told them how dumb they were and how stupid they were. And then they'd try and change their mind, and we'd tell them, we told you you were wrong. And we'd get up them, and we'd be dicks about it. And so what did they do? Ego kicked in. Desperation kicked in. We had an election coming up. We can't look like we're flip-flops. We've got to stick to our guns. The reality of it is the speed of change is so much that we get new information all the time, and that means that we will end up having a change of opinion, and we have to have the personal freedom to do that. Now, that's not you change it every second day, and that's not because some guy yells at you and tells you to change your mind. It's that you get new information and you change it, and it's a cycle, because you're going to seek to understand, you're going to have a view, and you might change it. And I think, again, the opportunities I see are huge. This is not your first rodeo. You have seen seriously scary cycles. Like, I've had the wonderful opportunity of talking to people coming here. I was really scared. I didn't want to be super tone deaf and a real asshole. So Adam and Jacinta Coffey were lovely, and actually gave me some time. They're most beautiful couple on the whole planet. If there's ever a couple of Australia that there's some sort of competition, they need to win it. And then, Ollie from Humans of Ag and Millie and other people. And I was in Geelong in July, and I was grilling people about everything. So what I see is a country and a sector in a country that is highly capable of navigating some seriously scary shit. This is not your first rodeo. You will navigate it. You will get through it. And I think if you are someone that hasn't been through scary stuff before, go and find someone that has. And if you have been through scary stuff before, it is your responsibility to show people your scars, to show how much it hurt, but also show them that you survived it. Because there will be people that haven't been through interest rates going up. There will be people that may have bought a farm or got into a lease or something last year or 2 years ago, and this is really hurting them, and they don't know if they're going to get through it. And you know that they will get through it. You know they will, because you've been through it before. But we've got to make sure that we support them. What we don't need to do is pass down like a dirty heirloom our frustration or our exhaustion. We need to pass knowledge and wisdom and support, but we need to leave however we feel about the sector to ourselves at this stage, because people need to understand that there is hope. The next thing is our communities. Like, let's really embrace this. Look, okay, I watch McLeod's Daughters, and I'm sure, I've been assured that it doesn't really look like that, but in my fantasies it does. And I just think, though, the communities, right, in New Zealand and Australia and all our rural communities, even through the US, rural communities are really special, and that's a superpower. And let's not lose that. For me, I accidentally left all my gates open once, contractor come in, cut 600 and something bales of hay, a lot of pay for a little person to pick up. I rang the local farmers, they all came in with their trucks and their trailers and picked it up and put it in my barn. One of the wives did actually swear at me and say she hated me because they were off on their holidays. But, the communities stick together, and I think that's one of the superpowers. That is the key, is our communities. And that's embracing everyone in our communities. And I don't mean this from a political level, but that means Indigenous as well, is how do we work together better? And I know that probably sounds cheesy, and you're going, oh, woke bitch. But I'm not. I'm actually just real. I think the more we bring it in, the more we can superpower ourselves, the more we can get better and better. And biodiversity, and I've heard it said so many times today, it's super exciting. Biodiversity, man, it's freaking wicked. Like, you have biodiversity up the gazoo. You only farm like 55% of the land area, according to Google. And it may be a bit less, but, some of your regions, some of the areas will be just fascinating and amazing. And I think what we've got to make sure is that you really have that as part of your story or part of the evidence of what you're doing, that farming is good. And, look, I've learnt this through, other people, but, things like your bushfires and all those sorts of things that happen and how you actually manage those, that has to be part of your story. That has to be part of your passion. That has to be part of how you show the value you bring. Because if you weren't there, then you wouldn't be able to manage things and you wouldn't be able to protect the biodiversity, even though, admittedly, some of your biodiversity does try and kill you. I think one of the things is we've got to try and stop the noise. And I think, I don't know, maybe the policy people have left. I don't know if there's any policy makers in the room. And I don't mean this in a rude way, but shush, like shut up, stop talking. We need you on mute for a little bit, okay? Just a little bit. Because farmers aren't fighting back because they don't want to change. I hear this all the time, our farmers just don't want to change. They just want to hold everything the same. It's not that. You know what? You know what we're all hearing and feeling? All this fear, this social volatility. We have fear that we aren't going to be relevant anymore. That's what we're scared of. So we've got a bunch of people fearing their future, and we keep talking at them. We need to get on mute. And we need to listen. What are they telling you? When they tell you a policy is not going to work in a region, I mean, I don't know how a policy that stops water is even at a stage of anything. And I honestly think you can never get anything. But you take water away, that's pretty fucked, right? So we've got to listen. We need our policy people to listen, because how do we do this? And we've got to do it from the community up. Listen to the community. Listen to their solutions. Listen to their ideas. Go and see them and touch what is happening. Because I think when we sit in an office and we try and create some level of policy, we fall into the trap of talking at people, because you have to do it, because the blah, 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 and then we don't listen, and then we're not talking to the community. And then we get into a fight. We get into fist pumping, right? Well, not pumping, woo, not that one. Fist on the desk pumping. We get into that whole bit where we're just bashing fists on desks and trying to fight with each other instead of actually trying to find a solution. And I think if any and you know, hey, look, maybe to a degree we all need to do this every now and then. I'm going to leave you on this. Now, this is a cool thing about growing up in a household of alcoholism, is you get to learn some cool poems. And I think if anyone around the world, and I don't think it matters whether it's Australia, New Zealand, America, wherever we're farming right now, I think we need to have this saying every day. And the key here is serenity. Is we've got to have the serenity to accept the things we cannot change. Now, that doesn't mean you don't push back on the things you can't change. That doesn't mean you don't go and try and influence the things you can't change. But do not do what my parents did and waste every bit of your energy fighting something that is 100% inevitable that won't change, and then you have absolutely zero left in the tank to change the things that you can. Because there will always be an answer. Things will always work out. There will be hardship, there will be pain, it'll be tough, but things will always work out. The next bit is that courage to change the things you can. So in an area where you might have some shitty policy come in that is almost impossible, fight the policy by all means, but also take some time and courage and work through it so that you can find a solution at the same time. And then the last thing is the wisdom. And you know, I'm not trying to claim I'm great with the wisdom myself personally, but you've got to make sure that you actually have the wisdom to know the difference. Because I am seeing people break themselves they're breaking their hearts, they're breaking their communities' hearts, they're fighting amongst themselves in the sector, fighting things that we cannot change. You know, 10 years ago, I think maybe even 5 years ago, futurists said that the change in the next 10 years will be more than we've had in humanity to date. And in my mind, it was all about flying cars and getting teleported, you know, and actually I thought, should it be great if they come out with some food that made me skinny? And yet to be seen. But what's actually happened is it's societal change. And that's there's all these changes that we're not going to be able to reverse, that we might hate, and that might be really difficult. But if we fight them and fight them and fight them, and waste energy, we're going to miss some freaking wicked opportunities that come with it. With every challenge, there is always opportunity. And some of you are like, oh, yeah, sure, whatever. And that might be the case, but you've got to go seek an opportunity. Challenge punches you in the face, comes up to you, taps you on the shoulder, pokes you in the eye. Opportunity, you've got to go looking under rocks. You've got to force yourself to find it, and you've got to push hard. And all of us, here's my contact details if anyone wants to complain. You know, I think all of us have a responsibility to be the dealers of hope. We do not want to be the dealer of this is the end of the world. We do not need to be the dealers of this is unworkable. This is impossible. We need to make sure that we are the dealers of hope. And that isn't about telling people that things are better than they are. This is about showing people that things are hard, but good things are worth having. You know, the easy road leads nowhere worth going. I seen that on a t-shirt once when I was out running many years ago. And I just thought, oh, God, you bitch, in front of me. But anyway, she was skinny and she was running fast. But it's, you know, the whole thing here is we've got to be the dealer of hope. If we want to get more people in the sector, let's not talk about how shit the sector is constantly. Because that's not good marketing. I'm not a marketing expert, but that's not going to get people in the door. If we want to inspire our public, our communities, we want to influence our politicians, you influence the public. But you do it by saying to them, let's do this together. We need your support. Not that you hate us, you need to like us, and you need to appreciate us, because if it wasn't for us, you wouldn't be able to wear that jacket, and you wouldn't have any food. And I think sometimes those messaging gets very close. We've got to be very conscious of how we bring the public on board. Anyway, I've rambled on again. Jesus, I almost went on loop, didn't I? It was like a pub bloody song group there. I just started the whole session again. But look, I feel very grateful to be here. I've learned a great deal through this process. If you can take away one message, just take away that you are freaking awesome and your branding is exceptional and the products that you produce is great. And I just think that you have lost sight of how good you are and the opportunity that you're going to have in export. And the other thing is too, is be the dealer of hope. We can do that. We can get through this. And if you have been through hard times before and navigated them well, then that's great. Go find someone who hasn't. And thank you so much for your time, and I hope I get to have a beer with you later on.